Hello, and welcome back to the Wool Sea Knitting Podcast. My name is Rachel, I am your host, and I am a knitter based out of Ottawa, Canada, and this channel is my chatty outlet to talk all things knitting with occasional guest appearances by other crafts. Today is the afternoon of Wednesday, August 16th. It's muggy, and I really want to talk about knitting, so here we are. I would like to say, if you hear intermittent chirping of an alarm in the background and it annoys you, I understand and you have my full sympathies because it annoys us too, but we can't for the life of us figure out where the hell it's coming from. So welcome to our house and our reality for now. Okay, on to knitting. I have two finished objects today, one of which I am wearing. Let me just remove this whip from my lap. This is my Cumulus tee by Petite Knit, which is the world's most popular summer pattern, and I don't think needs any real introduction. I knit this in a Color Mart one-off silk, or at least it was a one-off at the time. Maybe they've restocked it in the color Perla, and this was probably the worst thing I've ever knit in terms of how I felt about it and my hands, but we persevered. And I'm very happy with the final object. So it's this incredibly drapey, loose, fingering weight garment. It's pretty temperature regulating. I got the sleeves I wanted. Has this nice medium depth V-neck. Goes down to about here. I like to tuck it in. I didn't do the decreases on the I-cord at the bottom, which is leaving it to flare, which I kind of like because it makes it a little bit easier for me to tuck it into things. And also, I would prefer a looser bind-off than a too tight bind-off, because my Cumulus blouse is a bit of a not too tight, but a tighter bind-off at the bottom, and it kind of then bags a little bit. It kind of cinches in a way that I don't mind, but wanted to avoid on this version. So this took me like 2.5 months with some pretty significant breaks in the middle because this destroyed my hands. It's a 28 stitch gauge garment. If you're on gauge, I was not, so I made a series of modifications. No, that's not true. I did two things. I went down a needle size and I went down a garment size to get roughly about a 25, 26 stitch gauge in this, and I'm very happy with that. But working on this was so tough. Silk has no give whatsoever. And the fabric while working on it, it almost was crunchy. It was so crisp. Like if I was to rub bits of the fabric together, you can still kind of hear it. If I was to rub bits of the fabric together before blocking, it was almost like metallic feeling. It was so strange. And working on it, sometimes it was squeaky. Not acrylic squeaky, but just, it was such a strange experience. However, I would say it's worth it. I'm happy with this. It really feels like everybody and their dog has knit a Cumulus tee. It was fun to work on this and feel like that sense of camaraderie of seeing everybody else's Cumulus tees in their podcasts. And also, I'm in a group chat that was doing a small, like, Summer in the Six Cumulus Cal thing. A bunch of us were knitting Cumulus tees, and it was fun. And that kind of helped push me along. But a series of modifications had to be made. First of all, when I had a gauge swatch, I blocked it, and I did not block it aggressively. I ended up with 24 stitches in 4 inches as my stitch gauge. This pattern is meant to be 28 stitches, so that was way off. So I did that on the recommended needle size, so I went down to a 2.5 millimeter to knit everything but the I-cord, which I then did on a 2.25 millimeter needle, which got me in between that 24 and the recommended 28. But because I was still a good 2-3 off with the new needle size, I went down a garment size as well, hoping that would be enough, which I think was also good because it meant overall less knitting on this brutal fabric, which I think saved me some grief in my hands and in my elbows, and did end up with a tee that's 2 size based on the recommended ease. A bird just landed in the window. So overall, my gambles paid off, and I'm really happy I knit that gauge swatch and took the time to to block it and then do the math to make some modifications. But it was so interesting. It was stressful not knowing how those modifications were going to play out while knitting it, knowing that it was causing me so much difficulty in my hands, and also I just found that much stockinette on tiny needles to be really dull. So combined with the fact that I had significantly less than the recommended yardage and there was no way to get more, this was a stressful project for a number of reasons. And I was nervous seeing how much smaller the garment pre-blocking was compared to what I wanted, even though I saw the astonishing amount that it grew in blocking when I did my swatch. So this was just kind of nerve-wracking overall, but my pre-blocked garment, in blocking, it grew 6 inches. Like this actual garment, it grew 6 inches in width, or I guess diameter, whichever one applies. From that, which I think A, again, silk grows like crazy, and B, things paid off, and I'm glad. I also had enough yarn. This is the exact length that I wanted it. The I-cord has enough stitches. The sleeves were technically knit 1.5 inches shorter than they were supposed to, but I wasn't concerned about that being some type of major sacrifice to the look because I just have short arms, as I am significantly shorter than the average Dane, and I have this much yarn left over. The I-cord was also just brutal on my hands. I think the moral of the story is it's going to be a very, very, very long time before I knit in 100% silk again. That said, I'm happy with this final garment quite a bit. I've woven in all the ends. I like the I-cord. Everything has settled quite nicely. It's so drapey. I really like the luster that this has. It feels more like silver than it does gray. I think it's beautiful. I think it's classic. I think it'll be very wearable. And even the slight fit issues that I had when I put it on for the very first time didn't bother me because I knew that the first couple times I wore this, the silk would continue to grow and mold itself to my body, and it did. The very beginning, these sleeves were just a smidge tight. Not enough that it was straining the stitches, but that I was more aware of it here than I was on any other part of my body, except the back, where I kept feeling like I had to stretch my back out to get more mobility back there. And then again, after wearing it for an hour, that's gone away. So if you like stockinette, I recommend this. I think that I have had up until this point a series of neutral colored stockinette garments or a series of really brightly colored stockinette garments, but I've knit so little texture this year that I think that this was, for me, that transition point as well, which is an unfortunate time for that to happen considering it's such small needles, but this was the moment where I thought, okay, no, I really want some cables and lace now. And that's that. But I mean, it's a classic pattern. I really feel like there's not a lot for me to contribute to the conversation on the cumulus tee. It's such a famous pattern. It's got thousands of projects on Ravelry. But this is my version. I'm happy I have it. I'm happy I knit it. I learned a lot about myself and how I feel about silk in the process. And I would be interested in knitting more fingering weight garments in the future, just in wool or a wool blend. And that's really valuable information to me. I knew that this little bit here would get me about 2 more rounds in the body, or I could split it in half and make each sleeve 1/4 of an inch longer if I really wanted to, but I still chose to bind off when I did because I was so tired of working on this. It felt like it was sucking my life force. I also just had too many projects on the needles at one time, and this was poking me in my brain saying, you haven't finished your cumulus tee, you keep casting on, but you haven't finished your cumulus tee, finish your cumulus tee. So I did it, the length is great, garment is great, I'm really happy. I sent a text to my mother bragging about it, but never again. So that's that on that. My second finished object is a pair of socks. And these, in my head, I think of as my chickadee socks because the colorway for the bulk, the main color, of these socks is called black-capped chickadee, inspired by the bird, the black-capped chickadee, which is an excellent bird, in my opinion. And I had finished the first sock in the last podcast, or no, 2 podcasts ago, and I have since finished the second sock. Here it is inside out because I was weaving in some ends. So, okay, finished but with an asterisk because I haven't woven in all the ends on both. I started and then I wanted to do something else, so I stopped. But I will get around to it, especially when I want to start wearing these and it gets a little bit chillier here. However, these are just a really basic 3x1 rib sock that I wanted because I really wanted this really cool, fun yarn to pop, and I think that it does. I did 3x1 rib on the front and a stockinette panel on the back, which of course continues for the bottom of the foot. And they were really good mindless knitting. But the thing is that I already had this as mindless knitting once I finished the increases. And then I had this. And this was good for on the go, but I didn't need this and this at the same time, but these were also the fastest things I could finish, so I did to clear my needles. But I really think if I had just paced myself a little bit better, I would have had an ideal situation of this plus a lace top, this plus a lace top, and really varied my knitting experience more. But I'm so happy these are done. Another reason why I wanted to do a 3x1 rib sock, which is, I think, my go-to comfort sock. It's my favorite sock pattern to knit, and I always love the fit of it, is because this is my first time knitting a sock on 2mm needles, and I was experimenting with a different stitch count and a different gauge, and I thought my best bet was to do that on my perfect vanilla sock. So that's what I did, and I'm very, very happy with the fit of these. I think my next move is to do a stockinette vanilla sock on 2mm needles and see how I feel about that as well. But I like heel flap and gusset. I like a rib sock, and I really like this fabric. I'm also finding as I continue to knit, my tension is getting a little bit looser, so it kind of makes sense to experiment by going down another needle size, and I think I will continue. So I'm happy with those. I think I have enough to get a second pair of socks out of this if I wanted to, if I again did contrast heels, toes, and cuffs, and maybe went to a 2.5 and a smaller stitch count instead, which still gets a sock that I like and find very comfortable, but it's not a priority. I have a lot of other sock yarn right now, and I don't want to rush to use this up for the sake of using it up when there are other sock yarns waiting for me in stash. But finished a pair of socks, finished my cumulus tee, and I'm overall feeling a lot more at peace and settled with where I am in my knitting. Because the thing is, because I couldn't knit as much, all my projects felt like they were stagnating, and then to cope with that, I would cast on more things. But then I would be overwhelmed by the amount of things I had on the needles. So that was a bad cycle to be in, but I'm really happy to have finished these things that I really like and will wear, and to be working on the new things that I'm working on. So, first whip I will show you. I have a few hibernating whips. I have a couple other pairs of socks, one DK weight, and then one acorn sock, which is on my desk just out of frame where it lives. But both of them are just such perfect autumn socks in terms of both the pattern and colorways and overall vibes. And I really enjoy leaning into seasonality, and so I'm focusing more on summer tops instead of autumn socks so that I can really milk the wonderful feeling of a late Ontario summer. And I will get to the socks very soon. But this is my rib lace raglan by James N. Watts. I am just a little bit past the sleeve body separation, and I think it's going well. I really like this. I got a lot of it done when I was taking a few days off from all the I-cord in the cumulus tee. This is a 60% wool, 20% rami, which is a paper-ish fiber, 20% silk, and it's an 18 stitch gauge, and it's lace, so it goes by really, really quickly, which was a good thing to vary with this. And it's a really easy, repeatable motif. It's fun, it's fast, and I hope I like the fit of it. But this one has kind of since taken a bit of a backseat because I have another lace t-shirt on the needles. And I'm knitting this in Ovis Etc. yarn, which I think is a German manufacturer. Apparently it's organic or GOT certified. And it is dyed. It's just very subtly dyed. You can, maybe if you look, you'll see some bits that look kind of dirty and then some bits that are kind of peachy. That's the dye. It's just I'm knitting it at such a loose gauge and then on lace that it just kind of looks like the shirt is a little bit stained as opposed to intentionally colored. Let me see if I can find an example. Like here. You can, if you look, you can see a bit of variation. I think that the way this fiber took dye, because of the combination, means that it's almost like only some plies or the halo of it took the yarn, which makes it look more like it was maybe sprayed with something as opposed to intentionally dyed. And I don't mind that. I think it's kind of pretty, but it also feels very low stakes because I have some wool dye that's meant for 100 grams, and this is 100 grams, or it will be once it's finished. So if I don't like it, I can just dye it red or green. And yeah, my one concern is that natural looking variation plus beige will make me just look naked or wash me out. But again, that's an easy thing to remedy with my little dye, I think. Those might be famous last words, but I hope not. But yeah, this will again be finished with more I-cord. So I'm putting it off. So my next whip is another all over lace tee, except where the rib lace raglan is a top down raglan, this other one is a bottom up raglan. And it is also a pattern by Claudia of Unit Toronto. And so this whip, and I guess this portion of the video, but this whip is in sponsorship or in partnership with Unit Toronto, which is a yarn store in Toronto. And the owner is something of an up-and-coming designer. And I'm sure if you watch knitting videos, you have seen her patterns recently. She had that book, Making Memories, come out. One of her designs was on the cover of Lina magazine this time last year. And she and her store also send kits and patterns and sponsorships to quite a few podcasters to get the word out on her patterns. And I am one of them. Their social media manager reached out to me a couple weeks ago asking if I wanted to participate in their Florencia Tea Cal, which is a pattern that was originally published in Lina magazine last summer and is designed by Claudia of Unit. And even though it was a bit of a late start to the Cal, and I said yes because I have a few of Claudia's patterns. I have favorited this one and was just kind of, it wasn't a priority for me to knit, but something that I wanted to. I really like the geometric lace, that it's a series of triangles, and I like the shoulder and neck shaping that it has going on. I thought it would be a very good transitional piece, just not for this year. However, they said they would be happy to send me the pattern and a kit for free, and a 50% off code for the pattern for any of you guys who might want to participate. And the knit along ends August 31st, which means it would be difficult, I think, to knit this in time for that, but you still have access to the pattern 50% off. And for the duration of the knit along, they're selling their kits for 20% off on the website. I will have the 50% coupon code here and also in the description box below, but I think that this is also good for viewers in the Southern Hemisphere because to me, an all-over lace fingering weight tee is just a very good warm weather and transitional piece, and this is that time of year when us Northern Hemisphere folk and Southern Hemisphere folk are both knitting transitional pieces. So I'm happy, and I've really been enjoying this. This is a bottom-up raglan, like I said before, which is a construction that I like, but I've only knit one other time, so that was another reason why I was happy to do it. And I'm knitting this in one of their kit colorways in a yarn by Emilia et Philomene, which is a Quebec hand dyer, and this is their base, Madame Philippon, and it is 50% superwash merino and 50% cotton. I didn't realize it was superwash when I chose it, And, oh, and this is the color Mayflower. They also have kits in Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino, and then the yarn that the sample was knit in, which is an Autumn and Indigo local 5-fingering weight yarn, which presumably is using local to Autumn and Indigo fiber mills or flocks of sheep. And I really like the motif, but I do think I have erred in my choice of yarn. I didn't realize it was superwash until I was already into the first lace weight motif here. And I had already knit both sleeves. And I thankfully went down a needle size for this because the fabric I was getting was quite loose. And I thought that it was just kind of slippery in my hands because of the cotton content. I just haven't worked in superwash by itself in so long. I guess I did this past winter in December for a baby jumper. But it just didn't occur to me that this might be superwash because I'm not used to seeing a superwash cotton combo, and I didn't really gauge swatch. I used this as a gauge swatch, and I noticed that my gauge was loose, so I ripped it out and redid it, and I'm really happy I did that, but I'm still expecting this to really, really grow because I didn't account for it in terms of the superwash content, in terms of sizing, and the original was not knit in superwash as far as I'm aware. So I'm expecting this to be either looser than the intended ease, which I quite like the look of, or something that becomes a gift to a loved one. We'll see. It's hard to get a sense of the size, because of the scrunching and the kind of rippling that lace does before you block it. But I'm expecting a 50% superwash, 50% cotton base to really just expand. Yeah, and that's also not the first time in the past month that I have accidentally acquired yarn not realizing it is superwash. So, bit of an L for me in my reading comprehension, but we must persevere. Beyond that, this has been a pretty smooth sailing project. It's really satisfying to get the 2 sleeves done off the bat, because whenever I look at this and I think, oh, I haven't done that much of the body, I don't have to do the sleeves. There is no sleeve eyelet. I started with it. It felt like I got something done so quickly at the beginning. It really galvanized me. And then I was just really excited to get into the lace. But I feel like this is an episode of me attempting to explain things and doing a bad job of it. However, I am a left-handed knitter. And normally, out of fear, I knit charts the way that a right-handed knitter would anyway. And the rib lace raglan is not charted, it's just written instructions because the motif is quite straightforward, in my opinion. And I just did it as recommended, which means I am yarn over, knit 2 together. This, I decided just on a whim to see what would happen to do it left-handed, meaning I'm reading a chart from the left to the right like you would read a book in English, as opposed to from right to left. Just because it's I thought, hey, why not see what happens? And something that even mirrored wouldn't really make a difference. It's a triangle. But I noticed that when I started doing this, and this kind of made some things make sense into some previous issues I've had with yarn overs and lace knitting left-handed in prior projects, is that when I do that, when I knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, that last yarn over that doesn't have a knit 2 together attached ends up way smaller. Do you see that? This yarn over at the base of the triangle versus the rest of them? It's significantly smaller. I don't know if this is just a general lace thing that right-handed knitters also experience, but what I started doing to counteract that is wrapping the yarn twice for that final yarn over, and doing that has given me the right size. So here at the top you can see there's not much of a difference, whereas at the bottom there is. So that was something I had to kind of wrap my head around, pun unintended, early on, but because it's a bottom-up raglan, I worked that out at the beginning and at the bottom where no one's going to see. Who's looking at my hems? Hopefully no one. So that's something. And then there was one row where I was 1 stitch off for pretty much everything, so I had to tank back an entire row, which was a bit of a bummer in lace, but it's such a straightforward and, again, easily repeated motif that I once I actually looked down, I realized I had done that. And then there are also quite a few breaks of just knitting in this pattern, which I think makes it a very good beginner lace pattern. So I'm really happy that they said, hey, do you want to knit this? Because the answer was already yes. And then I got a fancy yarn in exchange. But yes, this is Amelia e Philippine, which is a brand of yarn or a dyer who I have used once before and really like her very muted, light colorways. Another reason why I didn't just clue into the fact that this is superwash is the colors she uses are also muted and kind of natural looking to begin with. But really, again, my lack of reading comprehension. But I recommend this pattern so far. I think I will really have to wait and see how the raglan decreases shape up before I can say 1000%, oh yeah, you should do this or not. But so far I'm enjoying it, and if this appeals to you, you might as well take advantage of the 50% off code while it's available. The reason why I'm not doing this at the same time as the Rib Lace Raglan is because I really think that switching from knit two together, yarn over, knit two together, yarn over, to yarn over, knit two together will cause problems, and I'll do the wrong thing in one of these patterns, and then I'll have mistakes made and feel stupid. And I don't want to feel stupid, so I'm not doing that. But I think maybe I'm being a little delusional. I do think I will be able to finish this if I don't work on much else, which I currently haven't been, by the deadline, by the end of the cal. And then I will have this for September, where I think I will get a lot of use out of it. But I think it's fun that they have kits for 3 different wool contents. You've the 30% wool, the 50% superwash wool, and then the 100% wool, depending on your wool tolerance and your climate and what you want. And this is a 24 stitch gauge, which I am also using to test out, do I like that or do I think it's too loose in a fingering weight garment? Because I have a fingering weight sweater quantity in stash, well, kind of a scant sweater quantity, but we will discuss that in a fall knitting plans video coming to you soon. And the Jessie May Cozy Classic Raglan Light also uses a 24 stitch gauge for a fingering weight sweater, and I'm kind of using this to see if that is too loose for me or if I need to use one of the Elizabeth Zimmerman raglan pattern calculators to come up with my own instead. But yeah. Okay, so those are my, I think, most active whips. Like I said, there are the socks floating around. However, I've also started something of, it kind of feels more like an art project. Let me go grab what I have to show you from it. Okay, so the other day I was working on my cumulus tee and I was feeling a lot of creative energy, but not a lot of fulfillment of it via repeated just stockinette in the round for a million years. And so I was looking around my room and thinking about what could be fun, what are things that would scratch the itch I was feeling, what could use up scraps and feel not overwhelming to have, and would feel manageable as a long-term project. And I decided that I would like to make a kind of leaf and flower mixed knitting and crochet wall piece. I don't know if it's going to be a garland or a hanging or a wreath yet, but I have started making leaves. I am hoping to film a sort of project vlog for this because I think it might be a little bit more engaging than the previous attempts at filming project vlogs that ended up just being very boring, which is why you've never seen them. But yeah, so I pulled together a bunch of scraps that I think might be good. I hunted on Ravelry for different patterns that I think might be fun and YouTube. And I'm starting with this particular leaf, which is also the leaf, and I got this pattern from Emma of Midsummer Knits, who used this same leaf pattern, which is a free pattern, for her Taylor Swift Eras Tour costume. So I'll link her video down below if you want to watch someone make a costume for a concert that also uses this and is very creative and fun. But I've knit 4 of these leaves using some leftover Wool in the Gang Shiny Happy Aran Weight cotton. And each one of these is 6.5 to 7 grams, and I had 72 grams of this to begin with, so I think I'll probably get 7, maybe 8 if I switch to the smaller leaf for this. And I have a bunch of other scrap yarns that I'm going to use to make different types of leaves and different types of crochet and knit flowers. And anytime I just want a little quick hit, I want to feel a small amount of accomplishment by getting something done. These do not take very long, and the first time you knit one, it's pretty easy to memorize. I do this. I've also been a little bit, especially since you're going to see I've recently fallen prey to summer yarn sales and bought a lot of shiny new objects, but I still want to be working down my existing closet of wool, and also in particular using my scraps. So this felt like a really perfect project, and so far hasn't been adding to my feeling of too many whips, because I've already slated this in my head as a long-term project and something that's a scrap buster and something that feels more like an art project than my usual knitting, which I feel for me is a craft, and I identify as a crafter. Totally respect people who are like, we are fiber artists, power to you, but for me, so much of what I love about knitting is its inherent practicality. I love the function that I get out of these things. That for me is not a nice side effect of knitting. It's something that I think is so wonderful, that I can continue to accumulate skills and be self-sufficient. I think that's so great. But for me, this feels more like an art project and a fun one. I don't know what I'm going for the way that I typically do when I cast on a knitting project, and I'm really excited about it. But maybe in a few months there will be a vlog documenting this, and maybe you will just see occasional updates on these podcasts. So that's fun. I also would like to show you something really, really special. So I visited my mother recently, and I was hunting through her sewing basket to pilfer her goods for something. I think I was looking for a tapestry needle to weave in an end in my knitting, and in it is a really, really sweet doll sweater and hat. It's kind of hard to show them both at once, that I always take a moment to hold and look at whenever I go through my mom's sewing kit. But we were talking about it a little bit later, and she suggested, or she said it was okay if I took it to show you guys on the podcast, because this is some genuine vintage knitting. This is a doll sweater and hat that her grandmother knit her for her dolls, probably in the 60s or 70s. It's this all-over seed stitch with this super cute contrast bind-offs and cast-ons, and there's this really cute pleating at the back for my mom's doll, and apparently her grandmother knit these for all their dolls. I don't know if it was the same pattern, but you can see how the hat is a little bit more faded and some ancient Play-Doh is worked into this, and maybe to you that might be a little bit like, why are you showing me? But I truly think that this is so special, and I'm so happy that my mom kept it. And I also think it's really funny because that grandmother, my Nana Carrie, I am sort of named for her. My middle name is sort of her middle name. There was a bit of a mix-up. My mom was a little hazy after giving birth. We all understand. It was a high-pressure scenario. And my middle name is in honor of her middle name, because she made my mom swear not to give anybody her first name because she didn't like it, even though I would have been very, very happy with that as my middle name. But I was sort of named in honor of her. And she was a prolific knitter, particularly a prolific sock knitter. And to see that she chose to knit something in all-over seed stitch, which independently I've long said is one of my favorite basic textures, and that she also chose to do all these contrast cast-offs and bind-offs, which is one of my go-to just little ad hoc design choices, it just makes me feel connected to a woman I've never met, but who everybody loved and was a force of nature, and really, really cool. So I wanted to show you this. This is knitting that is probably over 50 years old, and I guess when we talk about heirloom knits, we don't just mean the sweaters that we wear. Sometimes it's the really precious things we make for our loved ones, for the things that they love, like their dolls. So yeah, some really sweet vintage knitting for you, and a very small amount of Rachel family history. She sewed down this little pom-pom hat. Come on. Try and tell me that there's anything more darling in this world. You can't. So yeah, it's very cool. I like it a lot, and I'm happy my mom let me share it with you. Acquisitions. I have more than I should. Wabi Sabi, which is one of 2 local yarn stores here in Ottawa, and easier to get to via public transit, had their summer stock clearing sale a few weeks ago. Looking to find a match for this yarn. I also took this to Knit City and didn't end up finding a match for it there, which is some Emily C. Gillies Surrey Silk. I don't think they dye this anymore, but I got it during their moving sale this time a year ago, and it was an unbelievable deal, and it's in this gorgeous green color, which is my favorite color, green, but I haven't been able, it's such a particular color, like it's so beautiful but kind of unique, and I want it to hold it with something that's gonna really like accentuate that as opposed to model it or mute it. And I've been struggling, but I thought a sale is a good time to go check. And I brought this with me to Wabi Sabi, and I didn't find anything in the sale bins or the store that matched this at a gauge that I wanted, but I did find other things. So first of all, this I consider to be a birthday gift from a particular viewer and friend who sent me a gift card to Wabi Sabi for my birthday. I don't know if you want to be mentioned by name, but you know who you are, and I would like to once again say thank you for your very sweet birthday gift. But this is Erica Knight Local Wool, which I think if you guys, I know that I've seen some British podcasters recently talk about being interested in trying out more wools local to them. This is made in the UK, and which is kind of funny that I bought it all the way here in Canada. But it's a BFL Masham blend, and it was produced from fleece to yarn in less than 50 miles. Starting at the British Wool Auction at Bradford, the wool is scoured, combed, spun, dyed, steamed, and handed in the county of Yorkshire. So this is a fingering weight wool. It's a 2-ply. And I'm going through the blue phase to end all blue phases. It's normally, as you can see, $30 per 100 grams. Each of these was $18, so that felt like a pretty excellent deal, especially since I am very interested in trying out different wool blends, different fibers, different blends of fibers, and it's really fun to support things that, I mean, I guess that local aspect or that low impact aspect is negated having had this shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to me in Canada, but I think this is really neat. I like the ethos behind it. I like the feel of this yarn. It's not scratchy. I like the texture. I think it'll be really good for colorwork mittens. I really like these 2 colors together. These were the last single skeins of either one of these. This color is Rosedale Pale Pink, gorgeous. And this is Bennett Pale Blue. I love it. I'm going to use these to make a pair of colorwork mittens. The pattern I have discussed in the past, they're the Flora mitts, and I think honestly this is enough to get 2 different pairs of mitts out of. But gorgeous, really excited, and I've been resisting casting these on. So acquisition number 1. Acquisition number 2. This is Rico Baby Merino, and each one of these is 25 grams. They're on sale for $4 each, so I got 5 of the blue and 4 of this peachy salmony pink to make a shawl or a wrap, because this is a fingering weight, and at the time I thought this is great. I have so many fingering weight scraps in my stash that I think I could use to really expand the size of it and do something really fun and colorful. And then I came home and I saw, okay, because I did look at the label, I promise, but it says 100% virgin wool. And then it says the yardage somewhere else. And then in a completely different part of this label, it says in small font, superwash. And I don't really go for superwash for a few reasons, unless it's for a gift or for socks. because I don't want to ever give anybody something that they can't care for or use. But superwash is kind of unpredictable. It makes me, like, I know how wool is going to behave. You know, like untreated wool, I know what's going to happen when I block it. Whereas superwash, like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen. So I typically avoid it. But I realized that, first of all, I think it's very funny that I got the superwash saturated version of these two non-superwash desaturated yarns. Very funny. I'm clearly going through a phase. But two, this means that I can instead combine sock scraps into this, and I think get use out of a lot of eensy-weensy sock scraps and a really pretty shawl. I'm really struggling not to cast on a mostly two-color version of the Scout shawl by Florence Sperling, but I think that's way too ambitious an undertaking for me at this point in time. But I look at these every day and I think, what if? But yeah, and for $4 a ball, such a good steal. I love these colors. It was hard for me to say no. So those are my main acquisitions. I also went to Twist Fiber Fest in Saint-André-Avelin, which is a small town in between Montreal and Ottawa, this past weekend, because they had Twist Fiber Festival, which was so much fun, and I'm hoping to do a video about that and Knit City in one. I think that that would be a good way to talk about those two things, and for a while I was struggling with how to approach the Knit City video, and then I felt like too much time had passed and it just wasn't worth it anymore. But I do want to talk about Twist because it was so much fun. I went with a friend. It's really easy to get to from either Ottawa or Montreal. It was 50 minutes from Ottawa. I think it's a little over an hour from Montreal, and I think it's highly worth it. But I did get something really freaking cool. I got some Angora yarn, like Angora from rabbits, and it is deliriously soft. It's just no itch, no problems, and it's so fluffy. It has this really cute halo, and it's so lightweight, and as you can see, it's already caked up because I want to cast on a little kerchief tonight with it for right before bed when I don't want to mess up the lace repeats on either one of my t-shirts, which is what I did last night, and I came to regret it. So I go to fiber festivals, it turns out, for a lot of things. It's really nice to feel like you're in a room with a whole bunch of people who love what you love, especially since I'm engaged in something of a niche hobby compared to my friends. But also just for interesting fiber blends for small producers and local producers and people who are just really excited to talk shop. And while we were there, there was one stand for a woman whose brand, or I guess she just calls herself the Angora Lady. It's La Dame aux Angora in French, and I think that would just translate to the Angora Lady in English. And she keeps English Angora rabbits and she combs them to get the fiber. She sells fiber, she sells hand-spun yarn from the Angora, and then she sells yarn that like this, which was professionally spun for her and combined with merino. So this is 70% Angora, 30% merino at a mill in Pennsylvania. It was so much fun talking to her. This was so interesting to me. I love rabbits. So thinking that this woman just has rabbits and she puts them on her lap and she combs them to get the fiber that I'm going to use to make into something is just so delightful. It is so charming to me. And this is the most expensive skein of yarn I've ever bought in my life. It is 140 yards or 120 meters in 40 grams. There were other options and it was $50, which is so much money for 40 grams of yarn. Then I was thinking about it, and that's, with the conversion, that's barely more expensive than Spin Cycle, and then I felt so much better about myself. However, I really liked her. I really wanted to try the Angora yarn. I thought about using it for weaving because I know you can get a lot more mileage out of a skein of yarn and it goes by faster in weaving, but I didn't want a skinny scarf. I want a little kerchief or an ear warmer. And yeah, if I was to buy more of her stuff in the future, I would have to become a better weaver first. We were talking and she says that she thinks that would be a good plan because she is primarily a weaver. She does knit, she likes knitting, but La Dame aux Angora is a weaver and a spinner. And I was like, that is so cool. And power to you. And that's like so much fun. Like I went to a fiber festival and there were sheep there. There was a food court. They had souvenir beer. I'm not even a Pilsner girl, but like, come on, okay, I'll elaborate in the video. I had a grand old time, and I had a grand old time buying rabbit yarn from the rabbit lady, and I'm gonna make a kerchief out of this. So here's my thought process. I knit a swatch. It is, oh yeah, actually almost dry. This is the drapiest, loveliest, and then she hand dyes it. This is the drapiest, loveliest fiber, and I want this like as close to my face as possible. So, but the thing is that Angora is very drapey, and I worry that if I was to knit an ear warmer, it would really lose its shape very quickly, or I would lose it because it's so small. So, I'm going to start and attempt to knit the Age of Brass and Steam shawl / kerchief. There are 2 different sizes given. And if I don't like it, or I run out of yarn, or it's too small, and it's just a tiny scarf that I think I wouldn't wear, then I unravel it and I make it into a neck warmer. Sorry, an ear warmer. But if not, I get this really cute, really basic kerchief. I've had the Age of Brass and Steam kerchief / shawl saved on Ravelry for a very long time. It's a free pattern, and there's just something about it that really appeals to me. First of all, the name is so cool, and the samples are all knit in moody colors like this that make it feel very like a turn of the 19th century. And I just like the garter eyelet in a shawl. So we're gonna see if I can get a little kerchief out of this. My goal is to have something that'll make me a little bit warmer in the office because it's so cold in the office all summer. I walk to work in 32-degree weather, and then it's 18 degrees inside, and that is impossible to dress for. So I would really like a little shawlette, like a little kerchief that I can just tie around my neck, and then it's almost like I'm wearing like a scout uniform or a sailor uniform where they just have that little bit at the back and then it's tied. I think that'd be really nice to keep me just a little bit warmer and be a cute accessory. I never thought I'd be a tiny scarf girl, but that's why we never say never, and I'm really excited about it. And I think that the stockinette will be a very good thing to balance all of my more intense lace knitting with. So yeah, I also got 1 sweaters quantity. Okay, and again, like pushing it, like a yarn chicken sweaters quantity of yarn from a man who's, again, much like the Angora lady, his stall, his brand, translates to English into literally Richard sheep. Like it's literally Les Moutons de Richard. It's just Richard sheep. And that I will be using very soon. I'm going off script. I said that I wasn't going to show you guys this to myself, no one else. I said I wasn't going to show you guys this until my Fiber Festivals video, but I got this. It's worsted weight. It's 50% wool, 50% mohair, and it's spun. And it has that really beautiful luster of mohair, but it's a spun and plied, not a wispy mohair yarn. And yeah, here's Les Moutons de Richard. He doesn't have a website. He gave us his email address, and he lives in Sainte-Justine de Newton. And oh, there's also a phone number. And this was like criminally inexpensive for what it is. Like I almost felt like I needed to tell him, so you can price your wares more. But it's in this really beautiful burgundy color. The colorways are not named. Every one of these is a slightly different weight. This one is 109 grams. This one is 105 grams. It's a 3-ply. And I'm gonna make a cabled sweater. And it's gonna be glorious. I'm really excited. I've been wanting to knit something in this shade of red, or just a dark red, for a while, and for a while this sock was scratching that itch, but I wanted a garment as well. I love a wine red, and I really like that this is cool toned without being purplish. I also got a drop spindle, just to have on hand for a rainy day. I would like to one day learn how to spin. It's not an urgent priority. I'm going to probably wait until the Ottawa Valley Weavers and Spinners Guild has more spinning workshops, because I feel like that's the kind of thing I would like to learn from somebody. And also, it's nice to be able to support people who are really good at this beyond just buying patterns, because I feel like attending a class is another way to support community and producers and our kind of craft ecosystem without just buying patterns or yarns. And I'm excited, and the woman at the stand was very kind and helpful. I have some random roving here because ages ago I got some to needle felt with, and then we didn't do the needle felting project, my friends and I, that we thought we were going to. So I have some stuff to just practice and mess around with if I wanted to, but it's not an urgent priority. I just wanted to have it for when I really feel the need to spin all of a sudden. And yeah, it was really nice. I also got some bird stitch markers because I really like birds. And yeah, I'm a happy camper. I am feeling like I have a very good mix of projects on the go that are fun, that are interesting, and that are wearable. I've finished things that I like. I have more on the horizon that I'm very excited for, and there are some big life things that are going on that are nerve-wracking, and all of a sudden I'm confronting all these things about like, oh, time is passing and my life goes on. But things are good. It's almost autumn. Looking forward to that. And hard to complain. Okay, the very end. Since I mentioned reading more last podcast, I've had a couple people ask me to share sometimes what I'm reading. So since a lot of other people would not be interested in this, goodbye, it was so nice seeing you. And for those who are, very briefly, I have been reading, I read this last month and I really, really enjoyed it. It's Black Sun by Rebecca Brownhorse, and it is a fantasy novel based on the civilizations and cultures, mythologies of pre-Columbian Americas. It's very interesting. The perspective jumps between a whole bunch of different players in a sort of like political intrigue plot with different motivations, different amounts of knowledge, and it's really fun to see it play out. I like the characters. The world building was so good. Sometimes with fantasy or sci-fi, which are primarily what I read very little else, and I'm unapologetic about it, is sometimes they kind of over-explain and over-describe the world that's so vivid but doesn't exist. They need to convey to the readers, but I feel like I'm lost in the description of like, so there's the table, and then but then there's this, and there's too much, and I get kind of sidetracked by the explanation of what the environment looks like from the plot, and I feel like this author does a great job of balancing, here's the world that things are happening in, and then all these people. Like, it feels very natural. So I tore through this book. It was so good. And I kept tricking my boyfriend into like giving me reading time by being like, don't you just want to like play Minecraft for a bit? And he thought I was being such a considerate girlfriend by saying, why don't you just relax and play Minecraft? But really it's because I wanted to read another few chapters of Black Sun. And then right now, I'm really pacing myself through the second book, which is called Fevered Star, which starts off a little bit more slowly and I guess is maybe a bit of an example of second book syndrome, because this is meant to be a trilogy, and sometimes trilogy authors are stuck where they can't do too much in the second book, because then what are you going to do in the third book? But it's really picked up at the end. I have some quibbles with it, but it's been really good. And it makes me very excited for the third book, which is supposed to come out, the third and final book, which is supposed to come out next spring. So if you like fantasy, if you don't mind a teensy bit of horror elements, if you like political intrigue and multiple perspectives, this would be a good book. This is not an example of the romantasy genre. There are romantic subplots. They are very much subplots, but I like the characters, and I like having so many different actors and different motivations, and not have it just be one person is good and everyone else is evil, you know? I like that. I like the complexity, and I like that the plot is not just evil invaders. I think I'd be interested in reading not just this, but whatever Rebecca Brownhorse has to offer in the future. So that's what I've been reading lately, along with a few other things. But Fevered Star and Black Sun by Rebecca Brownhorse, 2 thumbs up. hope that she manages to stick the landing in the third book. But yeah, okay, that is everything from me. I hope that you and your loved ones are all doing very well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy, and we'll talk again soon. Okay.